Royal ARCH Stories. Well, there's something I didn't know. Second lecture on Royal Arch Chapter. Lithuanian Most Holy Royal Arch 3 Crosses Hill Chapter near 61. Yours, Companion Audrys. We ask you to remember when you were initiated into Freemasonry, and were called upon to make a daily advancement in Masonic knowledge, and it is hoped that you will duly appreciate the beauty and exquisite interest of this, the foundation of the whole Masonic structure. We also ask you to open your hearts, ears and your minds, and enjoy what you are about to read, which is the interpretation of the extensive research into our Royal Arch history, by one individual. The history of the Royal Arch predates the craft by many years, and it continues for centuries after King Solomon's temple. It contains many fabulous tales, stories and legends, and from these the idea to compile a collection of short stories about the history and people took root. So to begin, who led the Israelites from the slave camps and where did he come from? Our first story is: it is not often that a murderer becomes one of the most important and respected people, and a great leader of a nation. Such was our Grand Master Moses. You may not know that he murdered an Egyptian, who was attacking the Hebrews, burying him in the sand, and then fleeing into hiding in Midian, now known as Saudi Arabia, where he became a shepherd. Years later Moses was in the hills, when he saw a burning bush, that did not seem to burn away. And he heard a voice say, "Take off thine shoes, for thou standest on holy ground. I am the God of those fathers." Moses was afraid, and hid his face. God told him that he had come to rescue the Hebrews, and that Moses was to go to Pharaoh, and tell him to let my people go, and Moses was to lead them out of Egypt. Moses said to God, "You want me, a wanted man, to go to the most powerful man on earth, and tell him my God says, 'Let all my people go'?" "This is my command," said God. Moses realized that speaking to Pharaoh would be easier than speaking to the Israelites, who had been settled for 400 years. Moses said to God, "When I go to the children of Israel, and say the God of your ancestors has sent me, they will say, 'But what is his name?'" For the first time since the dawn of time, the true and living God Most High was revealed, for God said, "Tell them that I am hath sent you." Biblical scholars have translated this to JHVH, or Jehovah, or Yahweh, or "I will be that I will be," or Lord. So Moses became God's spokesman. Moses was a poor speaker, and told God to give the task to his brother Aaron, but God saw good in Moses, and told him he would be with him. Within our Royal Arch temples we traditionally display the standards of the 12 tribes of Israel. In the center of the temple, however, the camp of the Israelites was set out somewhat differently. Every man of the children of Israel shall pitch by his own standard, with the ensign of their father's house. So the book of Numbers describes how the camp of the Israelites was formed. Companions, as they wandered the wilderness of Sinai, the camp of the Israelites was formed somewhat differently than is usually depicted in a chapter temple. In the north, under the ensign of Dan, the tribes of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. In the east, under the ensign of Judah, the tribes of Zebulun, Issachar, and Judah. In the south, under the ensign of Reuben, the tribes of Gad, Simeon, and Reuben. In the west, under the ensign of Ephraim, the tribes of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. In the center camped the Levites, who were the priests and holy men. In the northeast corner of the Levites' camp was the camp of the family of Aaron. And in the southeast, the camp of Moses and his family. In the center of this vast encampment of over 500,000 people was the tabernacle, the tent, that surrounded the most holy item of the Israelites, the Ark of the Covenant. As you are all aware, our ceremonies are very much based on symbolism, and one of the most important symbols is the acacia. Belongs to a large family of plants, and the acacia we know in masonry still grows in Lebanon. To the Jewish people it is a sacred wood used to build the Ark of the Covenant, and much of the furniture that adorned King Solomon's temple. We Masons have appropriated the acacia as a symbol to teach divine truth for all ages to follow. The acacia is a symbol of immortality of the soul. The Hebrew people planted a sprig of acacia at the head of a grave of a departed friend. Many other people substituted the acacia in place of other plants, as they believed it to be incorruptible, and not liable to attack from animals or insects, implying the incorruptible nature of the soul. The sprig of acacia to a Mason is meant to remind him, by its evergreen and unchanging nature, of that better and spiritual part within us, which is an emanation from the true and living God Most High, and can never die. In describing the symbolic usage of the acacia, mention is made of its wood, and its use in the building of the Ark of the Covenant. So how does it fit into the history of the Royal Arch? In the Jewish religion there are many sacred people, and sacred places, but very few sacred objects. The most sacred object was the Ark of the Covenant. A wooden chest 4 feet long and 2 feet 6 inches wide, covered on top by a slab overlaid in gold with 2 cherubim, which were winged lions, with human heads. It contained the tablets of the 10 Commandments handed to Moses by God, nothing else. It traveled with the Israelites throughout the 40 years in the wilderness, and was placed in the middle of the camp, surrounded by a tent or tabernacle. It remained with the Israelites until King Solomon built the temple at Jerusalem in 930 BC, to house it in the Holy of Holies. There it remained in darkness, visited but once a year by the high priest on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. In 587 BC the Babylonians captured Jerusalem, and destroyed the temple. At that point the most sacred object of the Israelites disappears from history. When our companions returned from captivity, and the sojourners found the Holy of Holies, whilst building the second temple, the Ark was not there. Neither is it mentioned in the sacred books of Ezra and Nehemiah. So where did it go? The most likely answer is that the Babylonians melted it down, for the gold when they destroyed the temple, as they were not sensitive to historic items of the realms they captured. Legend has it that King Solomon's son by the Queen of Sheba, stole the Ark and took it back to Ethiopia, where it is claimed to rest today. The Book of Maccabees in the Apocrypha claims the prophet Jeremiah hid it along with the tent, and the altar of incense in a cave, somewhere on the West Bank or the Dead Sea, the whereabouts known only to God. Within our ritual we learn of many characters, but in particular we learn of yet another king, So we now know that King Solomon built the temple at Jerusalem to house the Ark of the Covenant,
From Companion Odris. Companions, I kindly invite you to read and listen again, the stories about the main officers of the chapter, introduced from a bit different angle than before. If you consider this a bit boring, please feel free to jump to the slide What Was Lost and Found and continue listening and reading the rest of the very important and attractive stories.
Solomon was the son of King David. Solomon built the great temple at Jerusalem, that was destroyed by the evil King Nebuchadnezzar. King Solomon was famed for his temple and his great wisdom. His wisdom was shown when two women came before him, both claiming to be the mother of a baby. Both of them decided that King Solomon should choose who was the real mother. King Solomon considered the situation, and called for a general of the army to cut the child in half, and give half each to the two women. One woman screamed, "Stop, don't hurt the child. She is the real mother." Solomon said, "She is not, you are, for you would rather lose the child than see it hurt." Solomon handed the child back to its mother. It is from situations like this that the phrase, "the wisdom of Solomon," came from. Solomon's temple was the most magnificent building ever built, and he would have been pleased if it could have lasted until this day, so that the majesty of the Almighty could have been seen by the whole world. Who was Jehoiakim? People in biblical times thought little of changing their names, such is the case of our King Jehoiakim. You may remember that the sojourners' forefathers were led into captivity with Jehoiakim by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He had reigned for 3 months when this took place. He was the son of Jehoiakim the king, who had been known as Eliakim prior to his enthronement. It was customary to confer a new name upon a change of office in those days. Jehoiakim, the father, was killed by Nebuchadnezzar, and the son, Jeconiah, took his place, and changed his name to Jehoiakim, in honor of his father, and became the king we know from our ritual. He was a mere 18 years old when taken into captivity, and he was the last king of Judah. When Nebuchadnezzar died, his son released Jehoiakim, who had then spent 37 years in exile, and invited him to sit at an honorable place, around his table, above other kings in exile. The life of Jehoiakim is a good illustration of the maxim, "During prosperity a man must never forget the possibility of misfortune, and in adversity must not despair of prosperity return." The checkered pavement in our lodges serves as a graphic reminder of the same maxim. The reference to kings continues within the Sojourner's Tale, when we learn that King Cyrus allowed the Jews to return to their native land. But the amazing thing about King Cyrus is probably overlooked during the ritual spoken by the principal sojourner. That in the first year of his reign he was willing to let the people he had acquired in Babylon to be dispersed, and to even assist them to return to their native lands with his written consent and support. He also encouraged the Jews to rebuild their holy temple to their God, whom Cyrus didn't worship. Cyrus was a clever king. He saw that Babylon was overcrowded with beggars, with refuse in the streets, and saw an opportunity for these people to be better employed elsewhere, for Babylon was full of peoples of other lands, that the leaders before Cyrus had captured, and enslaved. He saw the mistakes of his predecessors, and gave the returning peoples of the many lands tasks to fulfill, thereby his empire was more productive. But friendly territories in the western borders would be a safer proposition as a defense against the ever-watchful jealousy of Egypt. Did God inspire Cyrus to issue that proclamation? We will never know. But to the Jews Cyrus must have been inspired by God. It was a miracle, a prophecy come true, a dream realized. They now had freedom to return to Jerusalem, and to rebuild their temple. How could Cyrus be any other than the servant of God doing his will? That they said is why Cyrus let them go. King Cyrus did not reign very long, but his successors in office fulfilled his proclamation, due to his wisdom, of the wise bodyguard. His immediate follower hanged himself soon after. The next king of Babylon was called Darius, and he had a loyal troop of bodyguards. 3 of them were thinking what was the strongest, wine, the king, or women. They placed the question under the king's pillow for him to find on awakening. This he did, and summoned the three men to the great hall. The king asked them each to discuss the answers for all of the royal court to hear, and he would decide on the wisest answer. The first spoke on wine. Wine is the strongest as it makes all men err, it makes the mind of the king, and the beggar the same. It makes all men forget their friends, and draw their swords against each other. This makes wine the strongest. The second spoke for the king. Men only have power of animals, but the king has power over men. Men will kill for the king, and die for him. This makes the king the strongest. The third spoke for women. Kings are born of women, and so are the winemakers. Women have the power to make men forget their friends, and family, and their country. But the third bodyguard continued, but of all of these, is not truth the strongest? Truth endures and is strong forever, it chooses neither side and has no partiality, and everyone approves its deeds. Blessed be the God of truth. All the people shouted, Great is truth, strongest of all. The king said, Ask what you will and I shall give it to you. The bodyguard asked that the king fulfills King Cyrus's proclamation, and returns all the exiles home, and help them rebuild the temple. The king arose and kissed him, and commanded this to be done. The bodyguard looked to the heavens and said, Blessed are you who have given me wisdom. I give thanks, O Lord of our ancestors. What is your name? Asked the king. Zerubbabel, replied the young man. And that is the truth. So we learn that the wise bodyguard was to become prince of the people.
From Odris. With this, we finish the first part of the second lecture, as it is very important to continue the learning process staying in a good mood and sharp attention. The continuation of the second lesson, presentation of really exciting stories, will follow very soon.